Hello, everyone, and welcome to another Wednesday webinar for the Climate Emergency Centre Network. We have an amazing, dedicated environmental campaigner, a speaker tonight, Dr. Gail Bradbrook. Maximum respect. She has been on the front lines for many untold long time and raising awareness and really campaigning across many different movements to really create change very fast. So Gail's coming to talk to us about So Now What on movement ecology and strategy in the face of collapse and fascism. And it's really, really important with the current news we've got. So without too much further ado, over to you, Gail. Thank you very much for coming. I'll just make you spotlight. Thank you. Great for coming. Over to you.
Oh, thank you, Phoenix, and thanks everybody for coming for what time you can and for all the work that you're doing in service to life. I maybe in that hearing what's alive amongst us, just to invite that moment to settle and feel our bodies. I can feel my heart racing a little bit actually, and yeah, just that moment to slow down. Maybe if you want to, you could feel your bottom sitting on whatever you're sitting on. If you're sitting, maybe you can feel your feet on the ground. I'm a fan of the old toe wriggling to remember that we've got peripheral parts of our body, and to come to the heart, to the chest, to the ache, and to the breath. And in that way, I'm really inviting life to speak through me, inviting the intelligence of life to be with all of us tonight, to be through us and in us and amongst us, and to be felt between us, and mostly wanting a dialogue, wanting to talk and answer questions and hear people's comments, but to shape that, I did recently write a blog. It's called So Now What, and I've popped it in the chat, and it was in the advert for this talk. So I was just going to read a few excerpts from that, say a few things, hoping it's enough to shape a conversation. There's a version of sciencey, autistic me that wants to explain everything in great detail. And boy, you'll get that if you ask the right question. But mostly, let's find out what questions are here amongst us. You may know that, having been with the phenomena in that way of Extinction Rebellion, I've been with different family, thinking about how we can be the change together. And we've followed various threads together, and what it's landed in for me right now is to be with this particular piece of work that's looking deeply into community and from the perspective of the systems of life. Excuse me, I'll just have a little slurp of the old tea. Teagasm. So, looking, as I know that you all are here, at the context we are in, requires staring into a horrifying abyss. Graphs of accelerating changes, exponential curves turning their hockey stick corner, exponential suffering already here and yet to come. I was in a ceremony one time feeling overwhelming grief. Excuse me. And actually, just before I entered that ceremony, someone talked to me about the James Hansen paper. What a thing to be told about just before you go into ceremony. And yeah, so there I was with overwhelming grief. And my medicine woman, she said, give it to the earth so she can compost it for you. That's what I was advised. And I planted my face into the bare soil, sobbing and keening. And after a while, she said to me, don't get stuck there. Don't get stuck there. Remember to connect to beauty. There's always something beautiful to remember and be with. It will sustain you. And when I've lost my sense of humour, I know it's time to take medicine, whether a walk in the hills, a breath practice, or gin, or whatever. These and others all have their time and place, and I really hope everyone here knows your own medicines. perhaps like me, you've been through some rounds of this, hearing from Phil, blessings on you, brother. You've acted, sacrificed, endured consequences. Maybe you felt alienated from loved ones in that dissonance of conversations that don't appear to recognise the same context, which is screaming at you. And now we're in this phase with the rise of authoritarianism, the depths of the racism, the casual erosion of women's rights, the inhumanity towards those seeking refuge, the shoring up of oligarch power, the spectre of fascism. Are you reeling as well? The body shock, the gasp, and then the normalising, the shift in baseline, not just ecologically, but about the shit that's going off in the politics. For some of us, this is a time of reveal, where the underlying logic of an anti-life system is shown in all its horror. It's about domination and control, scarcity, separation, powerlessness, and soullessness, acting together in a concert, forcing and allowing extraction, consumption, accumulation, excretion, pollution, exploitation, colonisation. It's a time when fallacies and delusions are being revealed, with the idea that we have a functioning democracy, for example, or that the economy is there to help us progress and give our children a future. Those fallacies and delusions are being revealed. And of course, for our global majority family, there was never such consistent obfuscation, hiding of these fallacies and delusions. They experience their bodies, communities, and lands being taken as the resources with which to build these layers of our delusions. And so we're now entering this time where we'll mostly now witness the breaking down, the drowning, the burning, and with our energies increasingly fixed on the challenges of survival. So that's why I'm asking you if you know your medicines, and I really ask you to find them together, find them with other people, find them in community. Because how we approach and rise to these challenges is really important, and some of us need to be able to plant our feet into the earth and to stand tall and to, like a tree, it's not bracing, it's being able to move and bend with the strong winds that are coming. And how we therefore face these challenges might also contain the possibilities for becoming more humane together, more alive together, and for a new paradigm to emerge. Phoenix-like, our phoenix from the ashes. We've got to focus on building cultures of repair, resistance, and regeneration together. I've heard in ceremony that there may be young ones alive today who will experience the transformation if we grasp that this is the work we have to do for the rest of our lives. And just to name that, it can feel overwhelming, exasperating, and defeated by how this right wing seem to win over and over. But of course, they're playing out their strategies within a system that they largely agree with. I'm using the quotes because I don't believe a true human being in their humanity is any of those things. Oligarch power and the destruction of life is baked into the current system. So ours is a much harder task. So let us be compassionate to ourselves to remember that it's a much harder task, but we are here to be up for this task. We are contending with the systems of control and domination, which determine whether we have a roof over our heads and food to eat. So we're contending with that on a daily basis, yet we're also desperately needing to simultaneously hold back the destruction whilst we try to breathe life into life-affirming values, processes, and structures. If you know the Bacana 2 loop, it's a time of things collapsing, falling to pieces, and out of the compost something else can grow. But in that mess, we're entering deeply into the mess now. So few. No wonder we can feel exhausted and confused. No wonder at times we feel or we are failing. There's only so much we can do, and I really wish for people to hear that in their bodies, to listen to their bodies, what their bodies are telling us, what our bodies are telling us. I've often said to climate activists who are driving themselves so hard that this is where the earth starts. If you're trying to tend the destruction of the earth by extracting from your own body. Of course, it's understandable, and blessings on your will and your heart and your determination. And also that is some version of internalized capitalism when it's at a price, when you're not listening and tending to your own needs. So please, because this is going to take all of our lives. And I do feel that there's a way forwards, right? So, okay, we are entering this breakdown. It's a complex adaptive system we're in. It's the climate breakdown, the collapse of food systems. And in systems thinking, if you want to get a bit nerdy, there are third and fourth order effects that lead to civilizational collapse. There are exceptionally difficult times ahead, but at the risk of being trite, these are times of both great peril and opportunity. The historian Walter Scheidel observed that rampant inequality is only ever destroyed by one of four forces: total war, violent revolution, massive plagues, or state collapse. And whilst I don't wish to see the suffering that will come from the collapse of this system's not okay. It needs to go, and we need to find the new one in its wake. The social philosopher and polymath Daniel Schmachtenberger describes how civilizational collapse could take us into one of two other states, either a fascistic, AI-enabled, surveillance-driven form of tech feudalism, that sort of nightmare. You can see it's already here. It's already happening to some extent. So that direction of travel. Or there's collapse into chaos, and you can have a mixture of those two things at the same time. The thing that is necessary for finding a different and better way of being together is to find what's called the third attractor. It's a thing in systems thinking. How can you pull yourself towards a third state? Neither of those two states. And Schmachtenberger has given the criteria for a third attractor. And bear in mind that life, I really often think when we're thinking about what we need to do and how to do it, listen to life. What does life do? Life works in fractals. So what I'm about to describe to you can happen at almost the individual level, the group level, your micro neighborhood level, your community. We need to find a third attractor in each of those spaces, right? And that third attractor needs to be able to affect infrastructure, meaning how we get water, food, energy, transportation, tech, those sorts of things. Go to the Green Gathering, folks, and there's people there who know all about each one of those things, experts, the permaculture guys, the people who rig up the tech, etc. We also need social structure, the institutions, decision-making bodies, and coordination protocols. So, this is about how do we make decisions together? Like there's been a lot of focus in our movements on citizens' assemblies. How do we decide, say across a bioregion, how to share with another bioregion our produce? How do we set up new forms of legal institutions? And then the superstructure is also necessary, and that's about the shared values, the culture, the spirituality. Again, all of this is a dear old Green Gathering, bigging that up tonight, and other places where much of the green and sort of social change movements gather together. We've been thinking about our rematriation processes, our reparation processes. How do we re-find healthy cultures together? That word spirituality has its limitations for some people, but I feel it as the understanding that life is animate, that there's a life force, and there are some ways in which life can come through us and operate through us if we find those practices and those ways of being with our intuitions, our wellness beyond the sort of mind, especially the left hemisphere, the mind of the thinking and sorting and doing. And those shared values, what are these times about? Culture, how do we initiate ourselves? How do we grow ourselves up? How do we stand tall together? How do we support our young ones? There's much work to be done here. And everybody here in this room is doing something that's got something to do with some of that, I believe. So thank you, because you're all needed. What this third attractor also has to do is mitigate for inevitable human catastrophe while preventing more from being created. So the catastrophe is coming, but how do we also meet those times of catastrophe and try to prevent more harm from being created? It's got to be coherent. So we want to decentralize choice making, but in a way that will quickly harness the mass intelligence. And it needs to enable us to act as individuals, but in service to collective well-being. I was just saying that, you know, everybody here has got a place in this. So the work of our times then is to find this third attractor together. Firstly, in ourselves, as I said, how do we work? How do we find the practices that bring us back into alignment with our own life energies? Don't skip over that, folks. You know, XR had 10 principles and values, and the regenerative cultures part was just kind of sidelined. Should have always been centralized. Partly because we don't know how to do it. We've got to relearn it. We've got to remember. We've got to figure it out together. And there is much to draw and much to learn from. People have written about this stuff, the stuff out there, right? So it's no easy task, but what I've just described above actually defines the collaboration needed by all the many groups of the green progressive networks. And as I say, it starts at the fractal layers. The issue you most care about is likely woven into the fabric of this proposal if we start to tease it open. So what this centres on really is a lot around mutual aid, and out of necessity, it will be met by communities that find ways together to respond to the long emergency of what's coming with climate, financial and food systems breakdown, with pandemics and the general collapse of what we consider to be civilizations. So we're talking about collapse. You might want to use the word crisis instead, because not everybody likes that word collapse, but we all know what we're on about, hopefully. Collapse, preparing communities, and then collectives of people within a growing network, doing the emotional and practical work to build infrastructure and create plans and enact resistance locally that helps prepare for civilizational collapse and to resist further destruction. And that includes the development of life houses, which are physical institutions at the heart of each neighbourhood that host meetings and house useful equipment and information. Obviously, climate emergency centres very much lend themselves to this work. And that's why I suggested to Phoenix in recent times that he hosted dear old Adam Greenfield, who's written the book Lifehouse, very relevant, and we're working together. So thanks for bringing Adam to the network as well, our Phoenix.
He was brilliant, really, really good. Highly recommended book. Check out the network there, Weaving over.
Thank you. So in effect, what I'm talking about is that each community collectively making a choice between this chaos and the depravity, the fascism, whilst working together for more chances of survival. And grim and practical as this sounds, because it is, it will also require some of us to be able to stand tall, the momentum of change not hitting us in quite the same shocking way, because we did know it was coming, and we found our medicines and practices that help us to show up and hold a spirit of care, collaboration and freedom. And this is actually also about building power together. An essential tool for collapse preparing communities will be non-violent civil resistance. They're going to come after us for conscription. There's going to be the fascists in our town and so on. We might need to resist evictions or fascism or conscription. We might need to occupy land to grow food. We might need to be stopping the pollution of our water bodies and preventing further destruction. And that includes by joining forces across the world with other communities of resistance, where the anti-life cancerous forces are trying to take hold. And I think of that global linking, as my elder Kofi Mawuli-Klue talks about, as being a form of the global human family evolving and an ability to act like a collective immune response. The assemblies are going to be an essential part of this. And a key thing about assemblies, and Adam writes about this well in his book, is that they have to have agency. You know, so if you ask an assembly, you know, how we're all feeling about climate change, there's not necessarily a lot of agency in that, unless it's a a thing about feeling something together. It's if you ask a community about how it's able to plan and respond to increasing crises, what can it do? If it assumes that the government, the powers that be, the local resilience forums, whatever already exists, that aren't going to be able to cope, because that's what's happened elsewhere already. So what are we going to do as a community? By definition, a community focusing on preparing for collapse with the rationale that nobody's going to save us, we've got to do this together, it's got inherent agency. It also has an inherent rationale for involving wider audiences, organisations, and for intergenerational work across communities, because we're going to have to get out there, deepen relationships and trust, engage across active groups and organisations that are already there, of course, anchor organisations, they're called, mutual aid networks that already exist. We're going to need to do skills and equipment audits. You know, where's the local electricians, the person with the 4x4 that can get through the flood? Where's the local midwife, etc.? Who's up for doing some organising on this? Who's up for doing some door knocking? There's what's called an asset-based approach to developing community plans that build on core infrastructure and on focus on collective safety. So this is where we're going to have to fight fascism showing up in our streets. We have to figure out which buildings could be repurposed as life houses. These can host equipment and stores of food and so on. And it absolutely going to include people that are good at building community and culture and community makers who can hold space, help with healing, build relationships across divides, bring ritual for both grieving and joy. There's something in Extinction Rebellion really where you can go out and do an action with a sort of sprinkling of well-being in it, looking after the affinity group, maybe doing a debrief after. Cool. Regenerative cultures want to be so much more than that. They're helping us to grow up and show up together, to use the phrase of Vanessa Mercado de Oliveira from Hospice in Modernity. And what I'm talking about is about fundamentally building power, because as we build these life houses and these collapse preparing communities, as the shit hits the fan, as the crises hit, we're going to have to make decisions together. Some of them are going to be difficult decisions. And so those bodies that we've created, we best really make sure they're focused locally to start off with. I did go to see our dear Roger Hallam recently in jail, and part of my purpose was to talk about mutual aid. I'm really hoping whatever he cooks up next doesn't just sort of suck energy up nationally, that we really do build that local care and mutual aid networks and build power that way. Because once we've got these networks and we've got the assemblies in place and as things fall to pieces, then those assemblies across bioregions, across different areas and networks will be able to talk to each other. That's where we get the radios in and the guys who know how to do that. And we might make collective decisions. You know, we might make a decision, for example, to occupy land because we're going to have to grow some food. We've realised that the empty shelves in the supermarkets are a long-term feature. We're going to have to resist the disinformation that's going to carry on in the billionaire print and the online media. And we're going to have agency here, finally, you know, the billionaires and the online media. It's very difficult to deal with those polarising algorithms. But when you're the person who's supporting people to have food and to access medicines and so on, that's where battles with these giants can take place and be won. The battle for truth and togetherness, therefore, might be won by those who can support a community to feed power and heal itself. And out of this confidence, out of necessity, and out of the federated networks of assemblies, bigger shifts can be made. So, you know, if you're a community forming a bioregion, if you know what a bioregion is, it's a sort of geographic region where the landscape is of a similar ecology. It's often got a water body running through it. And you'll know that your food depends on that water. Right now, we're disconnected, we're separated from the life-giving properties of water. We've come to take it somewhat for granted. Of course, now we know how much plastic pollution's in there. We're going to so need our water, and praying for our water in that way, and we'll make decisions collectively to stop our water being polluted. So those of us that have done non-violent civil disobedience, our resistance tools are going to be needed. And those of us that worked in transition towns are thinking about collective energy generation. That's going to be needed. Those of us that have been thinking about how fascism shows up and how you really act in solidarity, those networks are going to be needed, all working together. And like I say, who's going to tolerate the madness of drastically unequal land ownership in the UK? It goes back to the thefts by the Norman Dukes and the class war of the enclosures. It's a very small story, but it's a signifier for me. There was a UK community who pulled together during a horrendous flood, and they were all, I think, exhausted and needed some food, and they were gathered around the local shop, and it was Sunday trading hours, and the owner said, well, I can't open, it's Sunday trading hours, and they said, you got to open. And of course the law was broken there and then, because people will ignore the problematic laws and regulations of the state when the state lets them down and out of necessity, right? The commons will be decided and enacted out of necessity. So I say this because there are networks that are focused on bringing to life the commons, focused on land justice, focused on different aspects of social justice. This is necessary in these fractal layers of surviving what's coming. So what will happen first is this stripping away of the systems that apparently care for us and feed us now. It's already happening, and we'll speed up. Who's going to name this and begin the work to prepare? And as I say, this is very fractal. So there are just, you have to take on the whole lot. There are just different aspects that can be taken on. There are different networks this makes sense to, in my opinion. There's a lot to do, but surely we want to try, at the very least, to reduce the depravity on the way down, and potentially to see the transformation for subsequent generations. And guess what, folks? You're not going to know. You're not going to know what the end of this story is, because that's life, isn't it? You're just here for a while. Your ancestors brought you to this point, and the next generations are going to come after us. So you're not going to know what this story, how it unfolds. So all we can do is walk with really good intention about what we lay down and seed for the generations to come. It's not simply a practical project, though. After thousands of years of an anti-life system, I feel this as the systems of life coming through us. I sense emergence in fractal layers that can happen if we choose to collaborate as life collaborates. I feel the shared purpose, the repair, the recovery, especially the rebuilding of healthy cultures. Beyond a story of victimhood and loss, this is a co-creation, life-affirming and directed, a spirit of collective evolution. Thank you.
Wow. Brilliant. Absolutely smashed it, Gail. Packing so much in there on so many levels of movement organising and learning and wisdom, from the medicine to thinking 7 generations ahead. So folks, lots to think about there. So Gail, if you're happy there, then maybe we can tell people about the questions protocol. So basically, if down the bottom in the reaction screen here, you can raise a hand. Let's go back to the general view, and then it's like the old university challenge. We can see who does 1, 2, and 3 or 4, so we can see who is who wants to speak. So down the bottom there's a little heart. It says react. Let's just come off Gail's main view. And yeah, it can be a question, it can be a comment, it can be feedback, whatever that is. I think my old friend from Resistance Exhibition, Julie, it might be first off the mark there, if you can see. Let's see. Maybe we're on the first page. All right, absolutely really inspiring, Gail. Thank you very, very much. So folks, if you've got a question, raise or lower your hand down the bottom there. You can put a comment in the chat as well. And we really need to learn from all of these movements, all of these networks, and get everyone working on the mutual aid and cooperation, particularly towards solutions. I'd just like to say, I'm not great on the collapse subject, but I like the repair, resistance, regeneration, and transformation. We've really got to give people some hope in there as well. You know, it is pretty bad out there, but we need hope. So let's keep doing it.
Just on that point, Phoenix Love, because it's important. Things die, and we're a death phobic. You know, our cultures are death phobic. Our non-cultures are death phobic, and
Life, death, rebirth.
collapse is a word that comes from systems thinking, but basically think about something dying and don't think of death as a bad thing. Death feeds life, it composts. You know, that's what we're really talking about.
I totally appreciate that. Life, death, rebirth, compost the system, but we have to give people a bit of another word as well that symbolises that composting, regeneration. And I liked what you said on repair, resistance, and regeneration. We need to give them one other word that makes them feel, because some people don't have that attitude to death that we do have
How
about
do you
life.
speak, man?
Let's come over to Julie, and then Lucy, and then Michael Fox. I think Julie, go for it.
How do you speak, man?
Julie, can you hear us?
Hi, Gail. Thank you very much for a really inspiring talk. Yeah, my question is, I'm completely with you in terms of the compost, the sort of commons and developing the networks and the assembly, but somehow that to me seems like a great precursor, but it won't be enough, and we will need the institutions of the state ultimately. And I wondered whether you've thought about municipalism and the approach in Spain where they sought to take over local government, because we have had DIY democracy in this country. We've got some left-wing councils like Preston who've done some interesting things. So how can we do that? And have you thought about that?
Julie, thanks for that question. I appreciate it. And I'm learning a lot at the minute, actually. So I don't know a lot about municipalism. There's a bit of muting. Probably
I've muted. I've just muted. I think it might have been Neil's background. Carry on.
Over. Yeah, actually, a co-organiser for the Lifehouse Collapse Preparing Communities Network is Adam Greenfield, who wrote the book, and he's just doing his PhD on municipalism. We're also in our pilots chat, we've got Daryl Lackland, who's looking at community. When you can form community councils, that sort of process. So the flat pack democracy, fantastic. Like I have a sense that people being elected into parish councils will be really useful to make use of the sort of machinery of the state. So I'm definitely not saying ignore the state. And in fact, there are local resilience forums, and some of them are more switched on, and they're led by the states. And Anna Hyde here probably knows more about this than I do. But so yes, and it's a yes and, Julie, actually. I guess part of me is just don't assume the state's going to do anything. Sometimes it'll do bad stuff. I mean, I'm also thinking about if, you know, we could be an election cycle away from having a fascist running our country, right? So if there's any sign that a load of us are parish councillors, they can just change the rules, right? They're just getting rid of Stroud District Council at the minute. So I'm mindful of places that have been in versions of massive crisis and the state has failed to step up. So that's what I'm really talking about. But it's not to say the state and different institutions with the state aren't part of this. And we all know about upcycling. So that's, I guess, part of what we're talking about here. So thank you.
That helped, Julie. Lucy and then Michael Fox. I've got about 7 questions in the queue. Lucy, then Michael, then Anna. Lucy. Lucy, yeah. You have to unmute, Lucy. Lucy Wells from the Old Maker Triple S crew. You have to unmute if you want to say something, Lucy. Unmute.
There we go. Hi, everybody. I'm going to pop my camera on as well. So I've known Phoenix for a very long time. Other people might know me because I was a climate campaigner for a long time, but usually dressed as a mermaid. So if you don't recognize me, that's why. So I've stepped away from climate campaigning a bit to focus on healthcare and to try and build some regenerative healthcare as well. But the question I have is about how we can actually use the fact that some of our systems are becoming more and more data driven and actually kind of feed data that works for us. And so, yes, AI has brought us a whole load of threats, but are there also opportunities to say, actually, if you're looking at this, why are you leaving these people out? Why are you not looking at the whole picture? So, because we're seeing actually the benefit that climate data has of saying, look, this is what's going on, this is what's happening. Because in healthcare, a lot of the systems have already collapsed. So I have that question, Gail, and for others, is there a role for data in this if we are the ones generating the data and kind of putting the framing around it to make sure that it's asking the right questions and making the right conclusions? Thank you.
I just saw somebody use the word murmurations briefly in a chat, by the way. I was just saying just that today. It'll feel like a murmuration. Thanks for your question, Lucy. I did write this time last year about AI and a little bit about data, but it's not an area that I know a great deal about. And it's not really particularly central to what I've just talked about. I'd probably like to hear from you what you thought about it, because I think you've obviously been thinking about it. But I do know from the AI networks, there's a kind of X-risk concern that AI is going to turn into Mad Max and sort of, turn us all into human batteries or whatever. And some people think that X-risk is being exaggerated for nefarious reasons. I don't know. And then obviously there's a deep concern that the data, the algorithms are being driven by big tech and they're toxic. So I'm not sure how we would feed in the data when the tech bros are the ones that own the data and using the data. So I'm open to your suggestion about that.
One of the things that isn't generally understood about AI is how much human input the systems actually need. So there are people who are just building their own systems, but building them to generate the same sort of standard of data. So you're kind of you're being outsiders and outliers, but you're saying there will come a time where our data, you'll have to take it into account, even though it hasn't been developed on your systems. You're right. We can't seize control of some of these, big corporate driven machinery. But I think there's other ways to use AI or to other technologies. And at the end of the day, AI is just what's called a pivot table. It's just a way of comparing two different sources of data and making assumptions about them. So it's what people do with it that makes it evil. That's the challenge. Felix.
Thank you, Lucy. I think we're going to have some further debates on this in the movement. Michael Fox and then Anna.
Hello, everyone. Thanks, Gail, for an amazing talk and very thought-provoking. I'm from Extinction Rebellion South Somerset and trying to set up a community hub in Crewkerne. I just feel that one of the things we all have to think about is how we try and take communities with us. And that's one of the reasons I'm trying to set up a community hub, is because I think you try and take people with you, as you were saying, by showing that there's a need and that people need to pull together. And so I just wanted to say, I think what you're suggesting is really bold and useful. And I think we just need to keep exploring many different ways of trying to do this. And just to talk about the data idea that the previous speaker was talking about, I heard someone say that the latest AI from China can actually be downloaded. It's open source, so you can actually take it yourself and work on it. And there's scientists here in Britain who are not already doing that. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you, Michael. Get in touch about thinking I want to send to your way. Thank you, Anna in Islington. And then
can I just answer the question, Phoenix?
Oh, sorry,
No,
my brain's multitasking.
I did post a blog that I wrote on AI last year, in case that's of interest. But anyway, I feel like that's quite a big topic, as a thing for a night in itself, and I would have a different expert on that if I was going to host a talk on it. How to take communities with you. I mean, communities, obviously, I know you didn't mean it like that, Michael, not one monocrop. There will be people working on the front lines that are working at the coalface of collapse, of crisis on a day-to-day basis. And in thinking about this, some of us have been thinking, gosh, a load of climate activists piling into communities, what could possibly go wrong, you know, if we sort of go thinking that we're suddenly the answer to everything when people have been there for a long time. At the same time, the community and voluntary sector, I used to work in it myself, can be bogged down, it can be very funding driven. It can be depoliticized by the funders, or sometimes out of, you know, just where people are coming from. So it's very, very different and mixed sector out there. And so in the Lifehouse Collapse Preparing Communities work, we are thinking with people who've worked in communities for many years, how to find balance and how to approach this with some care. So as an example, you know, if I was going to do something, which I am planning to do in Rodborough, we're thinking about the stages of this. There's something about going to meet the organisations that are already there, and you're sounding people out, you know, you're taking a sort of asset-based approach, what's already there. And then if you're door knocking in your community, you know, again, each person, you're going to be thinking food bank, somebody's waving there, absolutely on the front line, you know. So all of these institutions are going to be important, and different people will have different appetites, and not everybody needs to be in the same level of conversation. I think I listened to the brilliant Imi Kaur from Civic Square last year, speaking at an event in Stroud. They've been around for a long time, working in communities, and they just use the language that's appropriate with the people that they're with. And that's, in that way, we've all got to figure out being a chameleon and move into to the best way of speaking in the situation. So yeah, I hope that helps.
Cool. Okay, Anna in Islington, then Nick Rosen, over.
Oh, hiya. Thanks, Gail, for that. That was great. I just had a few things that I kind of wanted to share, really. Before this meeting, I was in a meeting with Communities Prepared, having the first bit of storm preparation training that I've ever had. And I'll be honest, their take on climate change wasn't quite as I would like it. I was able to leave a colleague from the Climate Centre in that meeting so that I could come to this meeting, because we've now got a flooding resilience committee at Islington Climate Centre, and we made the flooding resilience committee by having a people's assembly on flooding. And so these are some of the tactics and the things that we can do to help build community and get ready. Coming back to Julie's, was it Julie who was saying, what about using the existing infrastructure that's there? I've used the Climate Centre to inveigle my way in everywhere I can with the council and the GLA and all of these kind of things. And I absolutely understand what you're saying, Gail. I'm starting to really understand about there being inertia and about politics being squeezed out by funding and all that kind of stuff. But at the same time, these institutions are full of individuals, and these individuals are looking up at the weather and thinking, we've got to do more. So the approach that I have been taking is to get in there and try and educate everybody who's in there as much as possible. So that we're doing like a double-pronged approach. We're building our community, but we're also inveigling our way in and bringing some of our more XR ideas or our proper understanding of climate change to people who are still reading the mainstream media. And to a certain extent, that's been successful. And yesterday, actually, I did go to City Hall for the first time, and Sadiq Khan is launching something next week called Loved and Wanted, which is their response to Trump's anti-diversity campaigns. And it was quite an interesting place to be with all other community organisers, and how everybody's finding the onslaught of fascism from across the pond making their life difficult. So it's not that everybody out there is unaware. And I think that we, using every network, Gail taught me this brilliant phrase that I've spanked the pants out of about 3 weeks ago, morphic resonance, which is lots of people having the same ideas everywhere. Anyway, I was wanging on about morphic resonance at this exhibition called Soil at Somerset House, where a lot of it's read out by somebody called Merlin Sheldrake, who's the son of Rupert Sheldrake, who came up with morphic resonance. So I don't know what's more morphic than that, but I think that we're all heading in the same direction. So sharing, I just thought I'd share those things with you, and I want to hear what everybody else has had that's successful in their areas.
Here's a picture of Anna. You're a legend, Anna Hyde. Thank you. Just to say, do you know, there's something in my mind, and somebody was waving food banks, and this is sort of slightly a bit of a confession in a way, and my mum's been a caretaker for my mum, and so I'm not an awful person from what I'm about to say, but you know, the kinds of people that stand on the bank of the river and there's bodies floating down the river and they get the bodies out, you know, the people that are on the front lines in communities handing out the food in the food banks. Part of me is like, I'm not doing that, like, because of course somebody's throwing the bodies in the river and I'm annoyed about that, and I just don't want to be the sticking plaster for capitalist colonialist modernity, because people are going to drown if nobody's pulling the bodies out. But those of us that run up to the top of the river and wave our placards or even glue on or something, we haven't built enough power to stop them from throwing the bodies in the river either. So we need to get over ourselves a bit in a way. And what I understand mutual aid to be, with some of us get in the river together, and it needs to hang on because it's currents, and we need to start building things in the river to help people get themselves out of the river, right? And the best community organisations, I mean, like, they're going to be about mutual aid, which is about not only you know, it's a political project. It understands that that we're in the shit because of the systems that operate, and we've got to build new systems as well as take care of each other. And I'm just talking about, this is now going to come mass scale because of the crises that's coming, and we'll do it out of necessity. So we may as well get our head ready for it. I in that way, I used to be a director of Transition Stroud for 3 years before XR. I feel, if I'm honest, I feel like transition towns, no disrespect, I've been there, done that, and XR and things like that, just been like the warm-up acts to get us to build a bit of muscle. That's how I feel it. Lots of love.
Interesting. Mutual aid groups, 2,000 set up very quickly in COVID. Let's keep organising. Nick, the off-grid guru, Nick Rosen, and Neil Goodwin of M11 fame. Over. Nick. Unmute, Nick. You have to unmute, bruv. Lovely.
Hi, and everybody. Thanks for such a wide-ranging discourse, because we've covered every single base. And but also for mentioning Rodborough, where you said you were about to do something. And also thanks, Anna, for mentioning, that it'd be great to hear from everybody. And we have heard from some people, South Somerset, from Islington, about what people are actually doing. But the thing I want to focus in on is, it's all very well everybody getting in the river and building stuff, but which river, what stuff? And I think our number one vital, urgent duty right now is to provide that leadership and guidance. What is it we should be building in the river tomorrow? Why do we need it? Why is this the priority? And I think the answer is energy, not just because it's the subject that here in Britain, and we're all here from Britain, the subject that's being dealt with politically right now is energy. That's the subject that's in Parliament every week. They're not, until today, talking about democracy, although today the government did withdraw 5 million votes from the next election. And they're not talking about changing the financial system. But energy, that's where it's at. And that's where we should be at. And we all need to come together into one or two showcase projects, 2 rivers, 2 things that we all get in and do together, because that's the only way we're going to provide a model for other people to follow. Thank you.
Thank you, Nick. Gail, did you want to?
Yeah, thanks, Nick. I'm sort of, in some ways, really resonating with what you say, to the point I've dropped you a direct message. They're saying, let's be in touch, you know. On the other hand as well, again, thinking about life and collaboration, one of the things that happens in life is when there's devastation, there are the pioneer species that go in and do the thing that most helps anchor the other things, right? So people are going to need energy, but it also might be that people need medicine, you know, it also might be that people need food. And you may say, well, energy helps you get food and helps you get medicine. But I guess what I want to do is not in any way make the people who their thing to do is to tend the water, or their thing to do is to take care of the culture, not be needed. You know, you're talking about a very key piece that needs to happen. And very practically speaking, and I said the guys that rig stuff up, I don't mean to make it sound like it's just men, by the way, but it's just my language use, are going to be absolutely needed. One of the things that Adam Greenfield's doing is putting together a practical sort of lifehouse pack. If you see the book, there's information in there. And so if you're saying there's this kind of technology that's going to be most needed, or people need to work on this particular thing, that would be useful for that. So that's another reason for being in touch.
Can I just clear up a little misunderstanding? What I meant was we've got to organise around something. We've got to come together around something. Every energy hub is going to need a trained nurse. You know, every organisation is going to need every aspect of its life catered for. But what's specific about energy right now, it is the political issue of our time. And it is a way to organise communities. It doesn't negate the need for everything else, from permaculture to medicine. But it does, you know, the enemy of our kind of organising is big business, and, you know, giving up all our power to let our lives be organised for us in the way we don't want. And right now, the sharp end of energy is providing our own, because the government isn't going to do it for us. And we don't want to wait until there isn't any energy.
Yeah.
So that's why, and resilience, you know, is the place to be.
So it would
all
make
the other things.
Gail and then Neil. Gail.
I guess I'm just, maybe it needs a longer discussion, Nick, but I guess I'm just trying to say, when you're talking about a river, I didn't understand if you're talking about, well, we do one energy project in one community.
Oh, sorry. No, I mean, you mentioned Rodborough, Gail, and I thought, oh, wow, supposing we were all doing an amazing project in Rodborough that covered every aspect, and that we could say, this is the showcase.
Yeah, I think, and it would, again, part of it is knocking the doors in Rodborough and finding out whether it is energy for people in Rodborough or whether it's something else, you know. So, but
Absolutely.
Anyway, I'm hearing the energy of the energy. Thank you.
Lovely. That's all good. And longer debates always needed on so many of these things come up each week. Neil of Vertigo Films M11 cinema film fame, and many films from the front line. Neil, and then Tim, and then Umbrella. Neil.
Hello. Yes. I volunteer with 2 food banks in the local area, and I'm aware that there are food banks in tens of thousands of areas, that all community hubs with local knowledge and just shared values, you know, really good people. And whatever happens with the climate emergency, whatever happens with fascism, these food banks are not going to go away. And it's not just about distributing food, it's about talking to people, it's about you know, dealing with all sorts of issues to do with their flats or whatever, you know. It's about so much more than handing out food. And these food banks are not going to go away, and they will be hubs. They will be at the front line of whatever fascism or climate emergency or whatever destruction of our communities comes forward. Then these people aren't going away. And I think that when you talk about lighthouses, I instantly think about, well, we've got them already. They're called food banks, and they're everywhere, you know. And most of the food banks don't even know each other. You know, they do stuff in isolation. So yeah, the network is already there. The local expertise and community is already there. It's just a question of not reinventing the wheel with lighthouses, but just recognizing that the structure's already there and it's happening and it works. Thank you.
I mean, thanks, Neil. And, you know, honouring everybody who works in food banks. And if people want to roll their sleeves up and simply get involved in something, that's certainly a really good place to start. My experience of food banks, which is limited but something, is that they are relatively depoliticised spaces, and that they will become overwhelmed when, you know, imagine the supermarkets being closed because there's food riots happening. The food bank's not going to be enough. The food bank expertise will be useful. They're not going to be able to birth the baby or provide the insulin or whatever. They create some starting infrastructure that may be useful. So just in terms of how people can act in communities, and this is part of what we're sounding out in our networks at the minute, but there is that rolling up your sleeves thing. Go and get involved in something that already exists. A food bank would be really an obvious place, but it doesn't have to be that. One of the potential downsides of that is that you can find yourself like you're in that there's overwhelming need, the person who was volunteering gets ill, suddenly you're in charge of it, and then you're running a food bank, and that's it, and that's where it stops, and that will be of use. And what are we going to do when, as I say, the supermarkets are empty of food? The food banks will need to talk to each other, need to be in a network. So another place where people can put energy is to figure out where the networks are. In Stroud, we have the network of Stroud hubs. So by the way, I'm already involved in Stroud work. I didn't mean to make it sound like I'm not doing anything in Stroud. I am. So where are the networks already, and can we help them to shift and think together? Needs a different skill set than just sort of rolling up your sleeves. The layer that we're thinking about is finding other people that want to think and prepare around collapse and what infrastructure is going to be needed, and the food banks will be part of it. Knowing where the local health providers are is also necessary. Knowing where the ceremonialists, the people that can tend grief are, will be necessary. There's lots and lots of other things that are going to be part of it. But I mean no dishonour to food banks. I just don't say that they are just it. I think they're a central piece of the jigsaw puzzle. I mean, and also to say, you know, mutual aid networks, again, in Stroud, they really fired up in the pandemic. Yay, mutual aid networks and the food banks and the other centres. And then also what happens, and this is common in the crises that go on for a long time, it's known as the long emergency, what's coming. It starts off well, there's a honeymoon period, and then the conflicts start to happen because the tensions are so strong, because there's so much need. Who are going to tend the conflicts? Who are the facilitators? You know, how are we going to stay together? What happened in Stroud is we've had that sort of, you know, the thing, because I'm vaccine skeptical myself, but the sort of anti-vax conspirituality piece that moves into the sort of alt-right wellness fascism, if anybody knows what I'm on about, handing the light out. There was division that happened. We felt together for a while in COVID, and then there was massive division. So we already had a taste of it, and it didn't look pretty, some of it. So that I think we just need a bit of a reality check on the complexity of what's coming. And thank you.
Thank you. Tim, and then Umbrella Northampton crew. Tim.
Hi. Hello, everyone. Thanks very much, Gail, for such a wide-ranging introduction to what we're thinking about, and, you know, going from self-care to coalface activism to spirituality and things like that, because it is important to include them all in the one kind of thinking, or keep them all interrelated in your mind. And what I wanted to talk about a little bit was something you mentioned briefly, which is the commons. I've been involved in that movement across Europe and in England, and I'm aware of things happening in other countries, like particularly in the USA as well. What I want to say as an introductory to this is that the commons is a very ancient thing and always grew out of exactly what you're talking about. There's a resistance to extreme scarcity, and either that would be through the sheer climate difficulty people were living in, or due to the extreme economic, social and political kind of deprivation in the Middle Ages in England, when that's how most people first know about the commons, because of the difficulty for people just living on the land to actually survive. And always the definition of it has been that it's about a community protecting a resource, and that this community has a structure within it to prevent the kind of divisions and misunderstandings that always are likely to occur within communities. And it also gives a very strong framework for relationships from one community to another. And I've often recommended the Seeds for Change book as a good guide as to how to keep those kind of relationships healthy. But the other thing I wanted to talk about briefly was just the commons is often associated with land because of the English, I think, way in which it's been understood. But it actually applies to any resource. So it can apply to water, energy, lakes, information, all sorts of things. And it's really important for people to understand there's been a huge explosion in the commons movement since about the 60s, and also due to writings and a Nobel laureate given to, I've forgotten her name now, unfortunately, but there's a very important moment when she set that out for economists to realize that the commons can work on an economic basis. So I just want to run through a very few quick ones for you to understand. Like in Naples, they got control of the water supply and turned it into a commons. Instead of it being administered by the state, it was administered by a commons that was created around it, which meant that the people in the local area had decisions. I wish I could have one in London for Thames Water, it's exactly what we need. In Hamburg, they got control of the electricity supply, not just the supply, but the grid itself. So these things actually happen in the real world. And the good thing about the commons is that it's a bridge between the self-organizing groups and the institutions of state. So it can be a way to negotiate and get control. Often the state and corporations want to give up on things that are not very profitable. And that's a great place where the commons can step in and make something work for people rather than for profit, and give them control. Some other examples of the Great Lakes in USA, Canada, which was a very moribund area, and they've created a commons around the Great Lakes, which is sort of re-stimulating the local areas in terms of the fisheries and the agriculture around it and the tourism and so forth. There are lots of commons involved in fisheries, about how to agree about how communities fish an area. That goes along on, I know, a lot on the East Coast of the States. And there are lots of commons around digital information. I think I wanted to see, Neil, was it Neil? No, it was somebody else, talked about how to get a focus. And I really agree about that. I think it's important. And I can see that energy is a really compelling one. But what I would like to think is that if we really want to have resilience, we're going to need control over water, agriculture, which means land and food, and energy, and information flow. The way information gets controlled. If we don't start getting some real inroads into making this something of the commons, that the commons, it's for the benefit of the commons and not for billionaires, it's going to be hard for this kind of resilience of the mutual aid groups are great.
Very relevant at the moment, Tim. Yeah, absolutely. Billionaires are the commons. Mm-hmm.
So I'm heartened by in the COVID situation, mutual aid groups really sprang up fast. And I live in an area where I wasn't expecting that at all, but it was absolutely amazing. And I do have that as a huge optimistic thing, that I think it will happen, but I think we've got to create the structures and the understandings of how groups operate within themselves and within each other and in relationship to the state. Anyway, thank you very much for listening.
Thank you, Tim. Gail, that's Tim's in the Occupy Economics Working Group, some of the deep thinkers. Gail, or we've got Umbrella and Mary Ellen wait next.
I don't think we need to add to that. I mean, the Stroud Commons is flourishing at the minute. We have a climbing commons even, so we're looking at the financial models that DILS is bringing forwards. There's lots happening. The commons, the assemblies work and collapse. They're all made to be together and more. So, that's what I mean. It's a sort of asking for a movement ecology at fractal layers. That's the point.
Okay, cool. Umbrella, the crew in Northampton, Umbrella Centre there, it's part of the CC network, and then Mary Ellen from DPAC. We're going to run to about 8:30, folks. Sorry if it's run over your times, but it's really important subjects. Movement ecology and what we're talking about is really, really powerful stuff. So I hope, Gail, you can still make it to 8:30. You're going to be all right to 8:30, Gail? Yeah, wicked. All right. Umbrella and then Mary Ellen from DPAC. And I think Fiona maybe had a question in the chat. Umbrella. Over.
Yeah, hello. It's Bates here from Northampton. I'm with Tina.
Oh, hi, Batesy.
We're all good. Centre of the radical universe, Northampton, that's for sure. So we've been a climate emergency centre, we didn't call it that, for over 11 years now, probably long before the Climate Emergency Network existed. And we've been developing our work and our understanding, and particularly since the rise of civil resistance with XR and Insulate Britain Just Stop Oil. We recognise that there needs to be an evolution in the climate space. We think it's time that another layer of understanding and another layer of action took place, however one wants to describe that. And we've been developing a model locally based around our new understandings and our previous experiences. We actually have and our model has looked at mutual aid, and we actually don't think that mutual aid is anywhere near enough. And mutual aid has already proven to be very short term, like 300 COVID things, they're all gone now. So it's very easy to respond with a mutual aid kind of response to an emergency. The crisis goes away, the mutual aid drivers go away, and it all fades into historical and local history and memory. So our question to Gail is, what do you say to us who think that mutual aid is clearly just not enough?
Yeah, there's something in that resonates, although I think to sort of characterise mutual aid as always being short term is not how I understand it. There's a book, Mutual Aid, by Dean Spade, is it, I think? And there's examples there of things that have gone on for many, many years. I think the whole point of mutual aid is to build something with longevity and purpose over time. Of course, things are going to spring up in an emergency and then fritter away again. And that's why the sort of proposal here is to be a collapse, or if you want to use the word crisis preparing community. Like, this is what's happening over the course of our lifetime and beyond. This is not the next pandemic or the flood, although there are elements of it, or the food shortage when we get multi-bread basket failure. This is the, you've probably seen that meme, the one where it's got pandemic and it's got climate change, it's got biodiversity loss, boom, they're all coming, right? So I just think that we, like with anything, we're not starting from scratch. We can learn from the best of sort of mutual aid examples across the world. Again, I'm going to re-recommend it, Adam Greenfield's book Lifehouse. He's gone looking at some of the best examples and what happened to them, so including, for example, the Black Panther Party and what they were doing in terms of mutual aid networks. He also looks at what happened in Greece when austerity was at its sharpest. And another thing to take note of, Neil, actually, on the food bank front, there were people with current institutions that they set up in Golden Dawn. The fascists tried to take them over in some places, so you've got to be ready for that. So I think we need to think to include mutual aid, but I think we're talking big, long-term, rest of our lives forms of mutual aid and beyond. So I doubt that we're in any disagreement, actually.
Mm-hmm. Lovely. Big up. Just want a quick big up there. We've mentioned the Black Panthers and the food programs. Linda, who's one of the architects of the Climate Emergency Centre Network, has been organising since 1968, and she was involved with the San Francisco Diggers and the Black Panther food programs, and she's still at it every single day, 16 hours a day for the Climate Emergency Centre Network. So a lot of mutual aid for a lot of decades. Big up the elders. Mary Ellen, to another one of our tribal wise ones. Mary Ellen from DPAC, Disabled People Against Cuts. Over.
Thanks, Phoenix, and thank you, Gail. Always lovely to hear you speak and to just be reminded of your incredible amount of not just wisdom, but heart wisdom and soul wisdom. I just, yeah, feel so grateful for your voice and for your thoughts and your spirituality that centers us. I really, really appreciate that. We had Neil Goodwin speaking earlier, which reminded me of his actions, and how he said he fought the law and the law lost, because he was highlighting how disabled people cannot run from floods and fires, and it's we're talking about so many different things, but I think we need to really be looking at how do we include and amplify the voices of those who are being hit first and hardest by all of this, the people in the global south, and whichever community, disabled people within that community, and how debt is being increased and increasingly being used as a weapon. I just got so many questions in my head about how do we address the growing inequality, the democide, the depopulation agenda, and at the forefront of the depopulation agenda, the climate crisis, is disabled people. Currently, this government is considering a bill, is going through Parliament at the moment, on assisted suicide, which is basically eugenics. Already over 1 million people have died in this country as a result of the existing policies and actions of this government. And were they to be allowed to have assisted suicide legalized, I dread to think how many more people are going to be targeted with it. When we talk about food banks, I've put a link in the chat from Open Democracy, going back quite a few years now, that article, but it's called The Well-Trousered Philanthropists, and it shows how the Trussell Trust has worked with the government and Tesco's and others to actually make the situation worse, not better, and how they give out 3 days worth of food supplies to people who have managed to get the right tokens and the right recommendations, etc. 3 days worth of supplies for a 7-day week. That's deliberately making people hungry, starving, malnourished. This is what they're doing in Palestine. They deliberately were counting the number of calories they were allowing in to make sure that people were not healthy. And this government is doing exactly that with all the people who are needing to use food banks. So if we are supporting food banks, I would say support independent food banks that aren't asking for proof of why you need to be getting a parcel. If you're standing in a queue to get a food parcel, you really need that food parcel. You shouldn't be being asked for proof that you need it. My thing is really that we need to be focusing on the connection between social justice and climate justice. There's a brilliant video by Greenpeace that looks at what's disability got to do with environmental, what was the word? Hang on. to remember, with environmental destruction. What's racism got to do with it? And I do recommend looking at it because it really brings home what's behind the climate crisis. And you can't solve the problem, I don't think, without actually understanding. And all we seem to be doing is reacting. Don't pollute this river, don't pollute this ocean, and not looking at how do we actually stop the issues that have led to this in the first place. And I think we really need to be focusing on how to be proactive more than reactive, and listening more and including more the people who are being hit first and hardest, whether it's people in the global south or disabled people.
Thank you, Mary Ellen. Gail, bless.
Yeah, thank you, darling. Thank you for bringing your truth power to this space, and just honouring you actually, because when I was in Glastonbury this summer, and dear old Seize the Day were on stage. I can't actually remember what they were talking about, but they in general, but they mentioned you, so I just wanted to say that your ripples flow far and wide. They were talking about Martin Niemöller's poem that many people know, that says something like, first they came for the socialists, then they came for the trade unions, and then that poem, you know, we all think it's a heartfelt poem, and Mary Ellen had pointed out to them that it never said first they came for the disabled people. And, you know, if there's a place where the system is not obfuscated for what it's really about, that's the leading edge, as far as I'm concerned, is how we treat disabled people. And in terms of that issue that Mary Ellen raised about assisted suicide, there's a brilliant programme on the BBC called Better Off Dead, which I recommend everybody watches to get different take on that agenda and the eugenics that are at the heart of it. It's not the only thing, I don't think, personally, but I think we really need to get clear on that. Yeah, there's something very deeply here about the principles that we're operating in, which is where sort of it is useful to lean into mutual aid. It's not, that's the charity model, quite often the food bank, and that's where it can come from, the sort of, when I said it's depoliticized, that was me not being strong enough, I guess, but, and I don't mean to make them all bad and wrong either, I don't think Mary Ellen was, but it's the principle that whoever's showing up for need, that's, they get fed. And, you know, Adam's book, his experience in Occupy Sandy was just that. They just had the very simple principles. If you come, you need, nobody's checking whether you've got papers or whatever. You're just here to be supported. And I think that's probably where fascism falls down, because even when I see it rising up in people I love and care about, and maybe we all have to take care of our inner fascist, right? But I'm just looking at them thinking, do you not realise you and loved ones would be like near the front of the queue? And it doesn't take gas chambers. Please, I'm not mentioning that lightly. It just is about allowing people to die and not taking care of them. And, you know, looking today for my own mum about the limited choices she has and how quickly that's going to run out in the system. It's very personal, this stuff. So yeah, blessings on your life, Mary Ellen, and your tireless campaigning, sister. Love.
Bless up, big up all the campaigners. We've got a few minutes left, maybe 4 or so. So Dottie, or is it Raga, and then Friday, brief points or brief comment or question, if you can. And we'll get Gail to sum up at the end. Over.
Hi, Dottie, it's actually hello. So I don't know why I never appear on the screen. Hello, there I am. Just, yeah, thanks, Gail. Really whirlwind of amazing ideas. So just the thing I guess I keep feeling about, since me and Raga watched this Bruce Parry thing, and also a talk given by somebody who lived with the Pan people. I just wanted to, I put it in the thread, but I just thought I'd say it and wonder what the response was. I spoke to somebody today about this. That to me, it's all so the Pan people in Borneo don't have competition, don't have hierarchy, don't have it in their hearts. They literally sort of can't compete, you know, they don't really understand it. They just don't want to do it, you know. They understand the idea of it, but it's just what's the point of that? And I was saying to somebody in the art gallery today, you know, the fundamental reason why I think we're in this mess is because of a psychological problem that came from the idea of ownership that came from the agricultural revolution. And so fundamentally, what I sort of wanted to ask you was, how do we go about trying to shift the mentality that underlies all of these other things? Because to me, it's about deep psychology. It's about a deep psychology that's spread, you know, for 5,000 years. It's been emanating out of these agricultural centers, these cities, whatever. And we need to change that. And I was suggesting that we look at, because we haven't talked about the next generation, how are we going to raise our kids, or how can we talk to kids about how to live differently and how to not be competitive, not be grasping.
Yeah.
And
Cooperation over competition, very important. Dottie, can we just give Gail a quick one back there, and then see if Friday from Nigeria could do a quick one? Is that okay?
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, it really is, as I try to centre, it's about building culture. And for me, that's a rematriation process if I'm working with the language that I've been taught with Pan African elders. But it's how do we remember and re-find our ways of being connected to the land and to life, and to cultures that cultivate a good mind together, cultivate a collective good mind. So that's, you know, with some of the energy here, it's all about the energy, all about the commons, it's all of it. And underneath it, as Daniel Schmachtenberger said, it's the superstructure, to use his language, it's the culture, the values, the spirituality. So absolutely crucial. I've put also the Tewe linking, because I love that bit about the Mbele. They dance the women dance the matana. They take the piss out of patriarchy amongst the men. The men have to take it, and they cringe and laugh a little bit, and then the men dance out the male version of the alpha male, and they restore the village, and they do that seasonally. And that's how the Mendele do it in the Congo. Fantastic. What are we going to do in Stroud and Rodborough?
Finding the rebalancing after many years of this. I think
You know
Bernadette
what I mean?
Daly talked a lot last week on this, on the goddess and earth worship stuff. But yeah,
I'm
very
obsessed
important.
with Amanita muscaria, if anybody knows what I'm up to with that. But yeah.
Nice. Ladies and gentlemen, it's been a really fantastic one tonight. Really inspiring. We've covered a lot of different movements and ideas and practical things we can do and things. And there is going to be a summary put up on the WhatsApp chat. Please join. The link's in the chat there. Just to say, you know, thank you very much to Gail for coming. I'll hand over to you for a sort of final parting sum up comment or whatever you want to say, Gail. Just personally, I'd really like to see the language of our movements. I totally hear everything you said earlier on collapse and rebirth and composting the system, but I feel it's very important that we get the words in about repair, resistance, regeneration, rebirth, something about the kind of futures that we want to see. It is bad out there, folks, but we need to give people a little bit of hope that there are many projects and many people working on amazing projects all over. We've seen this for years. There's 30 climate emergency centres there around the country, another 30 groups of one centres. There's these Lifehouse networks setting up. Please join and check that chat out. That
come back next week.
Come back next week before we have Dan from climateemergency.uk, the group that's getting all the council scorecards together, what they're doing. I'm going to hand over to Gail for summary. I'll put the upcoming webinars in there. Thank you so much for coming, Gail. Really inspirational. Keep up your good work. All power to you. Over to you for final parting comments.
Thank you. It's beautiful to see you all. God, fucking hell. Anyway, I can't summarize that. I have put a link to a WhatsApp group because I know what you all need is another WhatsApp group to be in. Never mind preparing for collapse, repair, regeneration, whatever. It's a WhatsApp group we all need. We can take our time on this one. Part of what we're trying to do is bring together, and I think it has been brilliant, some of it, that like micro design that something like Roger Hallam focuses on, is how do we go about this? Let's get this sort of designed up, and it needs intelligence in it, and it's going to need all of us in different ways. It really does. So I feel very I can feel the life energy and what wants to come through with this, and I know that we've been preparing well, and let's trust life and be well together. And you know, what did dear old John Lennon say? The thing with this crap that's going off, it can't deal with humour and non-violence. And so let's be beautiful together. Lots of love. Thanks, Phoenix, for getting this organised.
Brilliant.
Thanks.
All right. Thank you so much to everyone for coming. We do leave the Zoom open for people to have a little chat afterwards for 10:15. But if you've got to beam off, go. I will end the recording just there when it's big. Thank you very much, everyone. Please get in touch, see how we can all help each other. And just from the network, we need a lot more help. So let's get some funding into the network and help each other. Keep
Managed
network.
100 people this time.